to stop. Are you ready to start? I'm frozen. I'll come with
Oh, hello. There I am. This is a very strange thing to be doing. It's my first time, and I am super, super excited to be here. So, thank you so much for tuning in. And yeah, if you could just be patient because we could get a little silly with all this techie stuff. It's certainly not my kind of thing, but talking about facing school challenges is my thing. So, thank you so much for tuning in. And I want to maybe jump right into acknowledging that this is a very safe place. We've gone out of our way to make sure that everybody is feeling comfortable and that you feel at ease asking any questions that you would like. We're going to have a few slides to share, maybe a few polls, but first and foremost, it's important for you to know that how important it is to talk about mental health. So the word stigma comes to mind. And of course, if we can look at our first slide, um, well, yes, stigma causes fear and mistrust and discrimination. So it is so important for us to keep talking about this subject. It also stops people from getting the help that they need. Embarrassment, shame, and it shouldn't be that way. Everybody experiences some kind of hardship in life, and in fact, 1 in 5 Canadians will experience some kind of mental health challenge in their lifetime. So it's so common, but it is very difficult to talk about. And we're really hoping that doing these kinds of things is going to change and remove that stigma. So, the other thing, stigma can split apart families and friends, and that is not a helpful thing for us.
All right, so next we're going to talk about circles of support. So you are not alone, and if you are tuning in, we love that you are looking for ways to make it easier. We appreciate how difficult school can be and that there are a lot of unique pressures that students experience, and we want you to know that we know this and want to help you look for solutions, tips, and strategies. So let's talk about our personal networks now. Concentric circles or circles of support are a visual representation of those supports that surround you. There are supports around you already, but sometimes we might forget that when we feel isolated, anxious, sad, or let down. When we talk about these circles, we want to consider you in the middle. You are. If you have some paper in front of you, you could write down your name, maybe put a circle around it. Then think about the next ring and who might belong there. You might have a confidant. It might be a best friend or a cousin or just someone that you could just really trust. Yeah, you might also have your parents, siblings, grandparents, or not. There's no wrong answer. It is your space. The next ring, we want you to think about the school supports or community supports that are meaningful for you, whether it is a coach or a teacher. And in the outer ring, think of this as a sense of belonging, the community at large, spaces you can connect with others or just feel safe in, whether it is the food court at the mall, your local library, a youth space within your school. There's value in identifying these connections. And believe it or not, this is an actual strategy. Give yourself a visual to see, a visual cue. Write it down and draw it out. And what you wrote down can change over time. Sometimes when we are feeling so caught up in our negative cycle of thoughts, we can dismiss those who care for us rather than reach out to them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only other thing I would add to that, Selena, is the fact that you find friends and supports in some of the strangest places, people that you don't even know that are there to support you. So keep an open mind and know that that connection sometime is the only thing that you can rely on. So it's really important to constantly be pulling in that network of people and reevaluating who is in your life and at what time. Um, On to our next slide. Really important to talk about physical and mental health together. We know now that these two things are so connected, and there is not one without the other. And I'm sure from your own experiences, if you think about it, if you're feeling really low mentally, then your body is probably feeling pretty low as well, and vice versa. So, in the center of our diagram here, there are a number of things that link these two things together and help both your physical and mental health. So, we're interested in asking you guys about some of these strategies, and we want to know from you if you want to give us a few answers so we can do this poll. What are the ones that you find link your physical and mental health together? For an example, I know if I don't get a good night's sleep, then I am not feeling at my best mentally the next day. So, sleep for me is a huge one. And everybody is different. So, everybody is going to emphasize something different that works for them. And so, we're really interested to know. And for some of you who haven't maybe tried some of these things, just knowing that it works for other people maybe will give you the courage to try them. Oh, it looks like we're getting some answers, which is fantastic. Wonderful.
Mhm.
Sure. So it looks like we have a winner. We have 60% of you out there who are kind of in the same boat as me. And it's an interesting fact to know that as youth, science is telling us that you need about 9.5 hours of sleep per night. And ha ha ha, right? That is not going to happen, or it's likely not to happen. And so you guys are already in a sleep deficit. So when you're really, really tired, and I'm not going to get into like video game play at night or anything like that, but that's a common thing, and that we get our brains so stimulated, we have a hard time settling down, a hard time getting to sleep, and that impacts the next day of our mental health and well-being. Some of the other big ones are exercise and self-care, which self-care is probably my favorite thing to do. And I'm so impressed that that number is that high for the youth who have tuned in today. So yes, we have feel-good chemicals in our brain that are ready to help us feel better. And if we can access those through exercise, we are already moving in the right direction to make sure that we're taking care of our brains. One of the other ones, yeah, self-care. We got 20% healthy coping, and that makes sense to me because you're tuning in maybe perhaps to figure out how to get better at coping. And these are coping skills. They're skills that you're going to only get better at the more you work at them. It's like playing a video game. The more you practice, the more you learn how to navigate through these kinds of things that will lead to better physical and mental health. So thank you so much for participating in that.
Okay, and that leads us into our next segment of coping styles. So, coping is a variable that impacts our day to day. Sometimes we engage in coping styles that might not be the most effective. So, we're going to talk about two types of coping styles. One is called problem focused coping, and although it sounds negative, it's not. It's aimed at problem solving or doing something to alter the source of stress. And emotion-focused coping is aimed at reducing or managing the emotional stress that is associated with or cued by the situation. When we use problem-focused coping, we are using the tools we have to manage the situation, to fix the stressors that are affecting us. Sometimes when we get overwhelmed and are feeling the weight of school pressures and friends and family, we can get stuck in emotion-focused coping, which is not always effective. There are skills we can use to manage emotion-focused coping. We can consider our network of people around us that we talked about. We can find the links to the appropriate people to help us. When we feel overwhelmed at school and just cannot cope with entering a classroom, what can we do? Rather than leave or stay at home, what is a solution that can be done in the moment? Rather than, just choose not to go. How can you cope using effective solutions and use problem-solving coping skills? One way is to look at your circle. Who is positioned to help you in that moment? It could be a guidance counselor or a social worker at your school. Maybe taking the time to go to the guidance office and reach out can help you use your problem-focused skills that can essentially help with a positive outcome. You did not leave the building. You are trying to solve the problem, and you're looking towards overcoming the obstacle.
Fantastic. Sometimes when our emotions take over, we have a really hard time concentrating and using like the frontal lobe and accessing our problem-focused mind. So we're going to invite you to do another little poll. We want to know from you, what are skills that you already are using? Um, we've got, some people feel a lot better once they have a drink of water. Sometimes just leaving class and going to get a drink of water. You get a break out of class, and it changes your body temperature, and it can bring you back to a better place. A lot of people use counting strategies, and that helps them just to kind of be in the moment and calm their mind right there and then. Deep breathing, texting a friend. So those are all kinds of, those are your choices for this poll, and we'd be interested in hearing about that from you. So give us some answers. Of course, there's lots of other strategies too. One of the ones that comes to mind for me is the way in which I talk to myself. So self-talk is another huge one. When we're feeling overwhelmed and really, really super emotional, sometimes we can get into some pretty negative thought patterns. And we really, really end up beating ourselves up, and that's not going to help anyone. So these are the times where we want to be really kind to ourselves. And while we're figuring out which kinds of strategies, there we go. We've got huge texting a friend. Love it.
Mm-hmm.
There's that social connection. And I hope those friends are somewhere on your concentric circle because obviously that's something that helps a lot of people. Deep breathing, that's coming in a close second. And I would say that, again, that's a skill that you need to work at because the deeper your breaths are, and if they come from a place within, then you're getting oxygen to all of the organs in your body. And again, you're accessing those feel good chemicals. So practice your breathing because when you need it at those crazy, crazy times where you are just feeling totally overwhelmed, your body will respond to it if you've gotten really good at doing the breathing. I don't see any water drinking. Of course, we should be drinking water anyway. I think the thing is 8 glasses a day. I'm not sure if that's still the scientific rule. But, I think it speaks to nutrition and just taking care of your body and making sure that you're doing well. So thank you for participating in that. And we will go on to the last slide.
Before we do, I see a question popped up here, and I don't mind addressing it now regarding coping styles. So the coping styles that we've posted here do seem very binary, that they're very different from each other. And the question is problem-focused coping better to use than emotion-focused coping? In general, yes. So the idea of problem-focused coping is to use the skills that you have to manage a situation, to fix the situation. And emotion-focused coping is it tends to be linked to more negative outcomes. So using letting our emotions control the situation, and usually it's not the most effective way to manage what's happening in the here and now. So problem-focused is the way we're hoping to go, and looking at finding solutions and finding good skills that can give us the most positive outcome that we can, manage.
Sometimes just even labeling the emotion and knowing what you're working with
Mm-hmm.
is all you really need to know. Tune into yourself, label the feeling. And once you're able to acknowledge that, it becomes a little bit easier to switch over to a problem-focused mind. So just kind of stating where you're at and sitting with it for a second and acknowledging the feeling will help you to move into a problem-focused state of mind. I hope that answered the question. That's not to say that emotions are bad because we need them. And that leads me into talking a little bit about the big one that a lot of youth experience is anxiety. And it's important for everybody to know that anxiety, we were all born with the ability to experience anxiety. It's a much needed emotion. It keeps us safe. It tells us, that perhaps danger is around. And so our anxiety and our alarm, we have a built-in alarm that lets us know when we should be anxious. So, if there's a snake or a bear, or perhaps we're on the road and a car comes too close to us, those anxious feelings are there to let us know safety, safety, and they're really important emotions. But what sometimes can happen is those anxious feelings become completely overwhelming, and they start to get in the way of a lot of everyday activities, such as getting to school, finishing your homework, doing presentations, even sometimes just meeting up with friends or being in a loud cafeteria, managing your way through the hallways. And if your anxiety goes off and it becomes a feeling of feeling not safe, then it can become problematic because it ends up stopping you from doing the things that you need to do every day. So that's when we really have to pay attention to it and start to use our strategies. So anxiety, for the most part, is a normal emotion. We all have it and we all need it. But it's important to know what your triggers are and to start to begin to understand your patterns. So what are the things that set you off? And maybe there are strategies you can use before it even gets really bad. But again, acknowledge the feelings, that's okay. And then work hard at figuring out how you're going to calm your brain and calm the anxiety down so you can again then move to a problem solution focused model and use your brain to do some problem solving and perhaps take that risk of moving forward. So you're not missing out on the thing that was making you really, really anxious. Um, Anxiety can get in the way of good performance. So we want to make sure that it's something you're getting really good at managing every day because it's there for all of us. So you can also use, I'm just thinking about what we've talked about, so using your supports, bouncing these things off your friends and your family and the people in your circle of support to, again, reduce that anxiety and give you a chance to access the problem solving that you need to do in order to get through the situation. Is that a question? No? Okay. So here we have, was that another poll I saw, or are
Nope,
we
that
right
was
into the questions? Okay, that's perfect because we're coming to the end of our webinar and we're hoping that you got something out of it, short and sweet, and certainly give us some more questions if you'd like. Oh, here's one. Is there a difference between anxiety and fear? Excellent question. Well, anxiety is something that kind of is more built into us as human beings. We have a spot in our brain that manages that anxiety, and it causes us to either flee, fight, or freeze. And so that's pretty much kind of the definition of anxiety when that alarm goes off. And sometimes it goes off so often that it becomes a problem. But fear can be a little bit different in that you can have things that you're afraid of that aren't common to everybody. So, kind of maybe, I know I've got some pretty big fears of things like snakes, and I can't think of all my other fears right now. So they're a little bit different though, because you manage fear differently than you would manage anxiety. Again, fear is an emotion and it's okay to feel it. We just don't want you to be frightened all the time because if you're experiencing fear all the time, that's going to trigger your anxiety and then it's going to get bigger and bigger. So they kind of work together. Do you have anything else to kind of say about that, Selena?
I would just say that they are interrelated. That fear can cause anxiety, but it's a bit of a chicken and the egg. That they're a little bit they're quite connected actually.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Good questions.
Okay. So there's been a suggestion to look at the previous slide. Okay. So when we look at our relationship between anxiety and performance, we do have here at the peak some optimal performance levels. So if you think, for example, you have to say a speech at school, there's a level of anxiety that you might have that you might get a bit nervous, but that will actually help you with your performance. If you were all laxy daisy and didn't have any anxiety and just sort of went up, you might not be able to perform as well. So there is a healthy, as Patty was saying, there's a healthy amount of anxiety that's good to have, that can help you with your performance. And it is linked to sort of our primal state of fight or flight. That a certain amount is definitely healthy, but the challenge is when we get down to the bottom areas, when the performance will be poor. So, for example, crossing the road, a healthy level of fear is that you look both ways to make sure you cross safely. An unhealthy, you know, performance in that would be not looking both ways, or the performance is you don't cross the road because you have too much fear about crossing altogether. So that would just demonstrate what this big arc that we see here would mean. Good
So,
question.
so really, you can use that energy to challenge or to channel it into your performance, and that is a skill that you can practice all the time. How do I turn this what feels like negative energy, but it's energy that's needed? It's there. So how do I channel it into better performance? So it can actually be a really good thing. Don't be afraid of it.
All right, we have another question here. If I want to find a quiet space away from other people, where can I go? Um, I'm assuming that this is in the school environment because we're talking about school. So I would suggest getting to know your school layout if you can, to find those safe spaces. Or if you have a friend in the school that you can connect with and finding out where those spaces are. Um, Not every safe space in the school is advertised, so it might take a little bit of legwork and maybe either emailing your teacher or finding a group and just finding where those places can be. Navigating a big school can be challenging because each school has their own unique set of spaces for each type of student. So if you're looking for a quiet space, I've heard that learning commons can work, but in some buildings, not so much. So I think it's getting to know your school where your space is.
I think too, being able to advocate for yourself and not being afraid to say to a teacher or a trusted adult, I need a space in this school to be able to calm my brain when I get overwhelmed. There's absolutely nothing wrong with being able to ask that question. And if your teachers hear that that's something you need, then they're there to help you find that space. And it might be a matter of trying a few places out to see what works for you.
There's another question on here, and I think this ties into what Patty was talking about and being an advocate for yourself. The question is, what do I do if one of my teachers is a trigger for my anxiety? I think that's a tough question because you can't change people. You can't change who they are. However, you can advocate for yourself. So if you have a teacher who is triggering your anxiety, some ways to navigate that would be to talk to one of those trusted people we talked about in your circle of support. Maybe you have to go to a parent and just ask a parent how can I communicate to the school? Who do I connect with? Is it guidance counselors? Or would it be the teacher itself? Maybe not, because they're your trigger. But there are definitely people within your network that can help you navigate this.
Anyone else out there who has any ideas about how they can find a safe place or any examples of places that they've been able to access, we would love to hear from you. If you want to write it down, I don't, there's my techie thing right there. I don't know where you write it down. But I'm sure you can put it in the questions and answer spot. I think that's how it works. But we would love to hear from you because that could help other people who really need to know the answer to that question. I see that there's another question here too. What do I do if one of my teachers is a trigger to my anxiety? Oh my goodness, this is a very common one. We know that everybody has different styles, and this includes teachers. And sometimes teachers can push that anxiety button just by raising their voice or just by the way they talk to you. So I think that you need to understand what style that adult or that teacher has and maybe do a little bit of work around, is this personal to me or is it just their style? So, a lot of us get stuck thinking that perhaps it's all about you and maybe it's aimed at you, and it probably isn't. It's a lot to ask that you challenge that teacher or you go and have a conversation with that teacher. But again, that's where your concentric circle comes in. Is there somebody in that circle in your school that can be an ally to you and help you address that issue? Certainly, your administrative team at the school is there to make sure that if it is feeling too personal to you and your teacher is triggering you all the time, then that might be a conversation that you want to have with a trusted adult. So try not to personalize it, but if it gets in the way, then absolutely address it with your trusted adults in the school, because that can be a big cause of anxiety going to school every day. Good question.
Patty, I'm glad we agree on that one. So I see that it's 4 o'clock. If there's any final questions before we wrap up, I don't see any right now. Um,
This is so cool.
so from myself, Selena, and Patty, we're both clinicians here at Linwood Charlton Center. We want to thank you for participating in this. This was our first time doing a webinar in this format, so thank you for having the patience to navigate this with us. That was, really special that we got to have this safe space together.
And we are addressing stigma. The more people that tune in, like yourselves, the better off it's going to be able to talk about this stuff openly and not feel ashamed. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
I'm just going to jump on for a second here and say thank you so much to Patty and Selena and to Linwood Charlton Center for making Patty and Selena available to offer this presentation. And we hope that you found this short little time together something helpful for you. And on the slide there, you can see the web link that is going to be the place where you're going to be able to find this recording and resources related to the conversation today. And as the first session, that link doesn't have a lot on it right now, but we're definitely going to be growing it. And we do apologize for the email glitch in the beginning, and we'll definitely be following up after this session to provide you with a reliable email that has a link to the second survey for any of you who are interested in completing that and providing some information that can be part of our research study to find out how helpful these sessions can be for people. We do hope to see you again, and you can let people know about your space. And thank you so much for your time, everyone, and take care.
I want to do this again.
We will. Yay! Thank you.